So the last part of this session on memory is, can we do anything to make our memories better? We've already worked out sort of how it works in terms of a cognitive understanding of memory. We've looked at how our memories can be not so reliable, or not as reliable as we might think they are, and yet we don't notice that misinformation that trickles into our memories. But now, is there anything that we can do to make our memories better, to optimize our memory capabilities? And yes, absolutely there is. But before I give my top 3 ideas for maximizing your memory, I want to give a little warning about some of the brain training apps and products out there. Are they worthwhile? Your choice. If you enjoy them, absolutely they're worthwhile. But by and large, what they're doing is they're training you to perform a certain task. Certain memory training programs are really good, but some of them are just training you to remember a certain thing. Essentially, you're practicing a behavior, but is that transferable to a wider range of areas? Now, remember, right at the very beginning of this session, we talked about what is memory, and we found out that actually memory is involved in pretty much everything that you do. So what sort of memory tasks are useful to you? Well, is it the task that helps you remember the order of a deck of cards, or is it a task that enables you to develop all of your memory capabilities? And I argue that, well, we should be looking to those tasks that enable us to develop our general memory capabilities, not just remembering a deck of cards, unless you want to specifically remember the deck of cards. So I've come up with 3 ideas for areas that we can serve to develop our memory capabilities that will help us in all areas of our day-to-day life. And so the first of these really thinks about that sensory memory, and it's pay attention. Because we don't recognize half of the things around us, we just ignore it because we don't pay attention to it. And so one of the best things that you can do for enhancing your memory is enhance your attention. And how can you choose what you want to pay attention to? Because if you develop your attention, you've got more chance of remembering it because you're transferring it to your short-term memory. If it never gets to your short-term memory, you were never going to remember it anyway. It wasn't a memory deficit problem, it was an attentional deficit problem. And so there are plenty of exercises that you can do to train your attention, to focus, and to gain some control over what you tend to focus in on. Now, an interesting study might seem slightly irrelevant in a way, but I think it does tie in. Alcoholics, people with an alcohol addiction, are much quicker to pay attention to an alcoholic beverage than a soda. Well, we might say, well, that's obvious, they're addicted to the alcohol, but that's an attentional thing. You flash 2 pictures on a screen, one to the left, one to the right, and it doesn't matter which way round, they're much more likely to see the beer bottle before the Coca-Cola. And so it's training attention. That's something you can do for anything in life. So do think about training your attention to enhance your sensory memory, to get it into your short-term memory. Now, the second tip, once it's in your short-term memory, your primary memory stored, your working memory, you need to rehearse it. If you don't rehearse that information, it will go, it will decay. And so think about that rehearsal process. A lot of people think that as they get older, their memory deteriorates. Well, it may well do, but it might be this area of memory which is the deterioration, because the plasticity in the brain is changing as you develop and as you age. However, your memory, certainly your long-term memory, is still there. Why shouldn't your short-term memory be? Well, your brain is slightly less connected in terms of the plasticity has reduced, and so that rehearsal period needs to be longer. And that's, I think, where a lot of people go wrong. They think that they'll be able to remember things as quickly as they used to be able to. But if we use an analogy of tennis, do people expect to be able to serve as fast at the age of 50 as at the age of 20? And generally people would say no to that. So people think very differently about physical changes as they do to cognitive changes. But it's the duration of that rehearsal period which might need to be extended. You might need to bring that information round the loop a few more times to get it to transfer into your long-term memory. But really think about developing that rehearsal process. If there's something you want to remember, rehearse it and play with it. Keep it active until it has transferred across. And a third tip which ties into that and really maximizes the potential of your short-term and long-term memory working together is multiple encoding. Now, we code all of our memories. Our memories are written into code that we can understand in terms of cognitive language that is then brought back in to our working memory when we need it. And I'm going to use the analogy of a rock climber. A rock climber's hand. If you just use that acoustic coding that is the primary coding for your short-term memory, it's one finger. You're not going to get very far climbing with one finger. But if you then add in some visual information, you then add in some social information, you add in some emotional information, you add in all of these different details, then that package grows, and you get, every time you get an extra finger, and then suddenly you've got your whole hand's worth to climb with. It's like layers of an onion. You've got all of these different pieces of information that you can sew into the code. And every extra piece that you put in is something extra that you can grab onto to bring it back. Think about revising for exams. You can help yourself do even better in exams by just thinking about these multiple encoding types. Don't just think about the information that you're trying to remember. Think about the environment that you're trying to remember it for. Because an exam hall is a very specific type of environment. For example, it's quiet, it's quite large, but you've got a very small table with very little on it. So, if you're trying to remember something for that environment, is it worth going to Starbucks and sitting there with a cup of coffee, music in your ears, texting somebody here, another cake there and a bit of that, smile at someone over there? That's nothing like the exam hall. And so you've already taken away a type of encoding, which is your environmental encoding. And you've taken that option away from you. Go to a library, sit at a table with nothing on it apart from the thing that you're trying to learn. That is mimicking the environment of the exam hall. If you're high on caffeine, you're more likely to remember something that you've learned in that state the next time you're high on caffeine. Same if you're drunk. You're much more likely to remember a drunk memory when you're drunk again, not when you're sober. All of this information is tied in to the code of your memory. So when you're trying to remember something, think about all of those details that you can put in to be able to get it back out when you want to. So in summary of those tips, pay attention, rehearse that information, and make use of multiple encoding. And they are the three ways that I see us as being best able to maximize our potential memory. Thanks for watching, and as always, please do subscribe to Psychology Unlocked. Any comments in the comments below, and I will love to reply to those if you've got any questions as well. And I hope you enjoy all of the other videos. If you've got anything else that you want to find out more about, www.psychologyunlocked.com.